The emergency department smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of white that made skin look tired and floors look older than they were. The vinyl reflected the glare in long, sterile streaks. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in steady rhythm. A phone rang twice, then stopped. It was 6:47 in the morning, and the night shift hadn't fully bled into day yet. Diana Reese moved the mop across the floor in slow, controlled arcs, not the lazy back and forth of someone killing time. Precise, deliberate. Each stroke covered exactly the space it needed to, no more, no less. Her hands were steady on the handle, scarred knuckles pale against the blue of her gloves. She was 58. Silver threads ran through her dark hair, pulled tight into a bun that hadn't moved in hours. Her scrubs were faded, pale blue and soft from too many washes. They hung loose on her frame, like they belonged to someone else. She didn't look up when the voices started. 3 nurses stood at the station 15 feet away, leaning over tablets, voices just loud enough to carry. Maya, early 30s, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. Derek, mid-20s, still young enough to think confidence and competence were the same thing. Jenna, younger still, eager and uncertain in equal measure. Maya didn't bother lowering her voice. I still don't understand why they kept her on. She's what, 60? Derek glanced toward Diana, then back. Close enough. 80 higher, probably. Hospital scared of an age discrimination lawsuit. Jenna shifted, uncomfortable. She seems, I don't know, like she knows what she's doing? Maya snorted softly. She's slow. Last week I had to redo an entire IV setup because she left the line kinked. Took me 20 minutes. Derek shook his head. They should have retired her years ago. Diana kept mopping. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. A muscle near her temple twitched once. But her hands didn't stop, didn't falter. The mop moved in the same steady rhythm it had before. She turned the corner into the supply closet, out of sight. Inside, the shelves were metal and cold, stocked with boxes of gloves, gauze, syringes, vials. Everything labeled, everything sorted. Diana set the mop aside and began restocking. Pulling supplies from a cart and placing them on the shelves with the same precision she'd used on the floor. She rotated stock without thinking, checked expiration dates with a speed that didn't match the menial nature of the task. Her fingers moved over labels, reading lot numbers, comparing dates, her eyes scanning faster than her hands. She pulled a vial of epinephrine from a box, paused, held it up to the light. The liquid inside was clear, like it should be. But something was off. The viscosity, the way it caught the light. Too thick, just barely. Most people wouldn't notice. She set it aside on a separate shelf, then pulled 3 more from the same lot and did the same. Footsteps approached from behind. She didn't turn. Diana. Dr. Stevens stood in the doorway, a tablet tucked under one arm, his face lined with the kind of exhaustion that came from double shifts and not enough sleep. He was in his mid-40s. Kind in a worn-down sort of way, the type of doctor. Doctor who still remembered why he'd gone into medicine. He looked at the vials she'd separated. You flagged that epi batch? Diana didn't meet his eyes. Viscosity's off. Could be contaminated. Stevens frowned, stepping closer. He picked up one of the vials, held it to the light like she had. How did you even notice this? She shrugged, already turning back to the shelves. I just did. He studied her for a moment. She could feel his gaze on the side of her face. The unspoken question hanging in the air. I'll have pharmacy check it, he said finally. She nodded once. He left. Diana finished stocking in silence. When the cart was empty, she stood still for a moment, hand resting on the edge of the shelf. Her fingers brushed against the pocket of her scrubs. Inside, something small and metal. She didn't pull it out, just touched it through the fabric, feeling the shape of it. A pin. Tarnished. Old. She let go and returned to the hallway. At the nurse's station, Maya was logging something into the system. She glanced up as Diana passed, then back to Derek. She got lucky with that epi thing. Probably saw it on some Facebook post about expired meds. Derek smirked. Or she's just paranoid. Diana walked past them without a word. She picked up the mop again, returned to the far end of the hall, where the floors were still damp from the last pass. The light through the reinforced windows was starting to turn gold. Early sun cutting through the gray. Her hands moved, The mop moved, the world moved around her, but her eyes stayed flat, calm, empty in a way that wasn't peaceful. Beneath the surface, something else, coiled, waiting. She didn't think about it, hadn't let herself think about it in years. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped, a phone rang, a gurney rattled past, wheels squeaking on vinyl. Diana kept mopping. The emergency department went on without her. The afternoon light came through the emergency bay windows in flat, colorless beams. Diana stood at the end of a gurney, wiping it down with disinfectant. The cloth moved in slow circles, methodical, the same motion repeated until the surface gleamed. Around her, the department hummed with low activity. Voices at the nurse's station, a wheelchair rolling past, the distant chime of an elevator. She pressed the cloth harder against the vinyl padding. The smell hit her before she registered it. Sharp, chemical, antiseptic, mixed with something metallic underneath. Her hand stopped. For a second, the room shifted. The walls weren't white anymore. They were tan, canvas. The fluorescent lights became sun filtering through dust. The beeping monitors turned into the rhythmic thump of rotor blades, cutting through heat. Her hands were younger, gloved. Covered in blood that wasn't hers. Scissors in her right hand, cutting through fabric. Trauma shears slicing through a uniform sleeve, exposing torn skin and shattered bone underneath. Someone was screaming, not the patient. Someone else, further away. Her voice, hoarse from shouting over the noise. Stay with me, stay with me. The gurney beneath her hands wasn't a gurney anymore. It was a stretcher. Sand on the floor, blood pooling faster than she could stop it. Sergeant, we're losing him. I know. Get me another line. Her hands moved without thought. IV in, tourniquet tight, pressure on the wound. The helicopter shaking with every gust of wind, tilting, the world outside a blur of brown and gray. She looked down at the soldier's face. 19, maybe 20. Eyes wide and terrified, lips moving but no sound coming out. She leaned close, her voice steady, even though her heart was trying to break through her ribs. You're going home. You hear me? You're going home. His eyes went still. The world snapped back. Diana blinked. She was gripping the edge of the gurney so hard her knuckles had gone white. The cloth had fallen to the floor. Her breath came shallow and fast, her chest tight. She forced her fingers to release, straightened, picked up the cloth. You okay? Jenna stood a few feet away holding a stack of linens, her face uncertain. Diana didn't look at her. I'm fine. You looked, I don't know, somewhere else. I wasn't. Jenna hesitated, then stepped closer. Her eyes dropped to Diana's wrist, where the cuff of her scrubs had ridden up. A scar ran along the inside of her forearm, old and faded, but still visible. Burn tissue, puckered and uneven. That from a burn? Diana pulled her sleeve down. Long time ago. Kitchen accident? Diana picked up the disinfectant bottle. Something like that. She walked away before Jenna could ask anything else. The break room was empty when she pushed through the door. She crossed to her locker, punched in the code, and opened it slowly. Inside, pinned to the back panel, a photograph. Two women in desert fatigues, arms slung over each other's shoulders, squinting into the sun. Both younger. Both smiling in that tired, half-broken way people smile when they've been awake for 30 hours and seen things they'll never talk about. Diana on the left, another woman on the right, shorter, dark hair under a patrol cap, name tape that read Martinez. Beneath the photo, folded with military precision, an American flag. 13 folds, tight corners. Presented at a funeral Diana hadn't been able to stay for. Next to it, a small leather notebook. The edges were worn smooth, the cover creased from being shoved into pockets, into bags, into places it didn't quite fit. Diana touched the photo with one finger. Didn't take it out, just let her fingertip rest against the glossy surface for a moment. Then she closed the locker. The door to the break room opened behind her. She didn't turn. Derek walked in, heading straight for the coffee machine. He glanced at her, then did a double take. You served? Diana turned slowly. A long time ago. He poured coffee into a paper cup, eyeing her with something between curiosity and suspicion. Army? Something like that. He smirked, leaning back against the counter. Let me guess. Admin? Supply chain? Diana looked at him. Her face didn't change. Her voice didn't rise. But something in her eyes made him stop smiling. Something like that. The room went quiet. Derek shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable in a way he couldn't name. He took his coffee and left without another word. Diana stood alone again. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the pin she'd been carrying, held it in her palm. Small, metal, tarnished from years of being touched, turned over, held onto. Like a talisman, engraved across the top, 68W, Combat Medic. Beneath it, scratched into the surface by hand, 2 initials, EM. She closed her fingers around it, felt the edges press into her skin. Then she slipped it back into her pocket and returned to the floor. The emergency department was busier now. A family in the waiting room, a man holding his arm, a child crying softly in her mother's lap. Diana moved through it like a ghost, invisible and ignored. She picked up a broom, swept the same hallway she'd mopped that morning. No one looked at her. No one asked where she'd learned to spot a contaminated medication batch with a glance. No one wondered why her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, under circumstances most people couldn't imagine. She was 58, too old, too slow, too much of a liability. That's what they saw. But beneath the surface, under the gray hair and the faded scrubs and the quiet she'd wrapped around herself like armor, something else remained. She'd saved 11 men in a single day once, pulled them out of fire and metal and sand, kept them breathing when their bodies wanted to quit. She'd lost 19 others, and she remembered every single face. The emergency department was settling into the rhythm of early evening when the intercom crackled to life. Incoming trauma, ETA 2 minutes. Multi-vehicle collision, 3 critical. The words cut through the low hum of conversation like a blade. Maya straightened at the nurse's station, already pulling up protocols on her tablet. Derek moved toward the supply room. Jenna grabbed her stethoscope, hands shaking just slightly. Dr. Stevens emerged from an exam room, pulling on gloves as he walked. Maya, get trauma 2 ready. Derek, I need blood staged. Jenna, vitals kit and airway box. They scattered. Diana was restocking a linen cart near the trauma bays. She didn't wait for instructions. She set down the stack of sheets and moved into trauma 1. Her hands worked without hesitation. IV lines pulled from drawers, intubation kit opened, laryngoscope checked, blades snapped into place, monitors turned on, leads untangled and laid out in order. Chest tube tray positioned at the foot of the bed, sterile and ready. She didn't check a list, didn't look at a manual. Muscle memory. Maya appeared in the doorway, saw Diana inside and frowned. You're not assigned to trauma. Diana didn't look up. I know. Then what are you? The doors exploded open. A gurney slammed through. Paramedics on either side, one of them doing compressions as they ran. The wheels rattled against the vinyl, the sound chaotic and violent. Male, late 20s, steering column to the chest, GCS of 6, BP 80/40 and dropping fast. They transfer him onto the bed. The patient's skin was blue-gray, lips dark, eyes half open and unseeing. His chest rose unevenly, one side higher than the other. Maya rushed in, froze when she saw him. Oh God. His neck veins were distended, bulging against the skin. Tracheal deviation, the windpipe pushed to one side. His chest wasn't moving right. One lung collapsed, pressure building inside the pleural space with nowhere to go. Tension pneumothorax. Dr. Stevens pushed through, took one look, and his face. A went pale. We need a chest tube now. Maya grabbed the tray, hands fumbling. I'll prep. Diana was already there. Scalpel in her right hand, her left pressing against the patient's ribs, counting spaces with her fingertips. She found the 5th intercostal space, mid-axillary line, the exact spot where the blade needed to go. Wait, you can't. Diana didn't wait. She made the incision. Clean, fast, a single smooth stroke through skin and muscle. Blood welled, but not much. She dropped the scalpel, inserted her finger into the opening, spread the tissue with a controlled twist. Then she slid the chest tube in. There was a hiss, then a rush. Air exploded out of the pleural space, the sound sharp and wet and unmistakable. The patient gasped, his chest inflated. Color returned to his lips, pale pink spreading where blue had been. The monitor, which had been screaming a flatline warning, beeped once, twice, a rhythm. The room went still. Stevens stared at Diana. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Maya stood with the prep tray still in her hands, untouched, Useless. Derek, halfway through the door with a bag of blood, stopped and stared. Stevens finally found his voice. "Where did you learn to do that?" Diana stepped back from the bed, pulling off her gloves. Her face was unreadable, calm, like she'd just finished restocking shelves. "I used to walk trauma." "Where?" She hesitated, just for a second. "Overseas." Stevens looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You did field medicine." It wasn't a question. Diana didn't answer. The patient coughed, a wet, choking sound, but his oxygen levels were climbing. 79, 82, 87. Stevens moved to the bedside, checked the tube placement, listened to lung sounds. Everything was perfect. Textbook. Better than textbook. He glanced back at Diana. That was incredible. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked toward the sink. Maya watched her go, something shifting behind her eyes. Confusion, suspicion, maybe the faintest edge of respect. Derek set the blood down slowly, still staring at the space where Diana had been standing. Jenna whispered, barely audible. "Did she just—" Stevens nodded. "Yeah, she did." Diana stood at the sink, washing her hands, slowly, methodically. Soap, water, scrub between the fingers, under the nails, up to the wrists. She'd done this 10,000 times. Her hands were shaking now. Just a little. Just enough that she had to grip the edge of the sink to steady them. She stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the faucet. Tired eyes, lined face, gray hair coming loose from the bun. She didn't look like a sergeant anymore, but her hands remembered. Behind her, through the open door, she could hear Stevens giving orders. The patient was stable. They were prepping him for surgery. Everything was under control. She turned off the water, dried her hands on a paper towel, threw it away. When she stepped back into the hallway, the others were still in the trauma bay, focused on the patient. No one looked at her. No one said anything. She walked past the nurse's station, past the waiting room, past the supply closet. She found a quiet corner near the ambulance bay and sat down on a bench that faced the parking lot. The sun was setting. Orange light stretched across the asphalt, long shadows pooling under the ambulances. She pulled the pin from her pocket, held it in her palm, turned it over slowly, feeling the weight of it. 68W, combat medic. She tried to leave it behind, tried to bury it under years of silence and distance and menial work that didn't require her to think, to remember, to be who she used to be. But it was still there. It had always been there. She closed her hand around the pin and looked out at the fading light. Somewhere inside, a man was alive because she hadn't been able to walk away. She didn't know if that was a gift or a curse. The next morning came too fast and too quiet. Diana was back in the hallway, mopping the same stretch of floor she'd covered the day before. The vinyl reflected her shadow, distorted and gray. Around her, the department moved with its usual controlled chaos, phones ringing, monitors beeping, voices calling out orders and updates. No one had said anything about yesterday, not directly, but everyone was looking. Maya glanced at her when she walked past. Derek watched from the nurse's station, pretending to read something on his tablet. Even Jenna, usually friendly, seemed uncertain, like she didn't know what to say. Diana kept her head down and worked. The ambulance bay doors opened with a mechanical hiss. A gurney rolled in, pushed by a single paramedic. Male, early 40s, broad-shouldered and solid, the kind of build that came from years of lifting patients and equipment. His uniform was clean but worn. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He was talking to the patient as he rolled him in, calm and steady, the voice of someone who knew how to keep people grounded. Then he looked up, saw Diana, and stopped. The gurney kept rolling for another foot before he caught it, hands tightening on the rails. He stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. Diana felt it before she saw him, that familiar crawl up the back of her neck, the weight of recognition. She didn't turn. The paramedic left the gurney with the intake nurse and walked slowly toward her, his boots quiet on the vinyl. He stopped a few feet away. His voice came out low. "Careful. Reese?" Diana's hands tightened on the mop handle. She didn't turn around. He stepped closer. "Sergeant Reese?" The words landed like a stone in still water. The hallway went silent. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Maya froze mid-step. Derek looked up from his tablet. Jenna's mouth fell open slightly. Diana turned slowly, Her face was stone, blank, but her eyes gave her away. Just for a second, a flicker of something, recognition, sear, the past rushing forward too fast to stop. "You're mistaken." The paramedic shook his head. He took another step, and now she could see his face clearly. Older, lines around his eyes, a scar running across his throat, pale and jagged against tanned skin. Fallujah, 2007. His voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. Memory. "You pulled me out of an IED crater. My airway was gone. You did a crick on me with a ballpoint pen because that's all we had." He touched his throat. His fingers traced the scar. "You told me, breathe through this or I'll be really annoyed." The silence in the hallway was absolute now. Jenna's hand covered her mouth. Maya stared, her face unreadable. Derek had gone completely still. Dr. Stevens emerged from an exam room, saw the scene, and stopped. Diana's voice came out quiet, flat. "That was a long time ago." The paramedic's eyes softened, but he didn't back down. "You saved 11 of us that day." 11. He paused, his voice catching just slightly. "They gave you a bronze star for it." Diana said nothing. Stevens stepped forward, his face shifting from confusion to something else. Realization. "Diana, is this true?" She didn't answer. The paramedic looked around the room, at the nurses, at the doctor, at all the people who'd been treating her like she was invisible. "You have a legend working here, and you've got her mopping floors?" Maya flinched. Derek looked down. The paramedic turned back to Diana. His expression was respect, unfiltered and absolute. He straightened slightly, shoulders back, and for a moment it looked like he might salute. "It's an honor, Sergeant." He held her gaze for another beat, then nodded once and walked back to the ambulance bay. The doors hissed shut behind him. Nobody moved. Diana stood in the middle of the hallway, mop still in her hand, surrounded by a silence so thick it felt like pressure. Stevens spoke first, his voice careful. "Diana." She didn't look at him. "Is what he said true?" Her jaw tightened. Her hands were gripping the mop handle so hard her knuckles had gone white. "It doesn't matter." "It does. It was another life." Stevens took a step closer. "You were a combat medic." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were hard, but underneath, something fragile, something breaking. "I was a lot of things." Maya found her voice, quiet and uncertain. "You saved 11 soldiers in one day?" Diana didn't respond. Jenna whispered, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because I didn't want anyone to know." The words came out sharper than she meant them to. She saw Jenna flinch, saw the hurt flash across her face, and Diana felt something twist in her chest. She set the mop down, carefully, precisely. Then she turned and walked toward the break room. Stevens called after her. "Diana, wait." She didn't stop. Inside the break room, she went straight to her locker, punched in the code, opened it. The photograph stared back at her. 2 women in fatigues, smiling like they still believed the world made sense. The folded flag beneath it. The notebook with all the names she couldn't forget. She touched the photo, her hand shaking now, no longer able to hold it back. Martinez, dead at 26, shrapnel through the chest, bled out in Diana's arms, while the helicopter was still 3 minutes away. She closed her eyes. 11 saved, 19 lost. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. Stevens stepped inside, quiet, giving her space. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." Diana kept her eyes on the photograph. "Then why does it feel like I do?" He was silent for a moment. "Because you've been hiding, and hiding takes more energy than most people realize." She let out a slow breath. "I came here to disappear. I know, I didn't want to be her anymore." Stevens moved closer, standing beside. Deher, looking at the photograph. "The sergeant? The one who couldn't save them all." Her voice cracked. Just once, but it was enough. Stevens didn't say anything. He just stood there, present, silent, letting her breathe. Finally, Diana closed the locker. She turned to face him, her face composed again, the walls back up. "What happens now?" Stevens met her eyes. "That's up to you." She nodded slowly, then walked past him, out of the break room, and back into the hallway. The others were still there, watching, waiting. Diana picked up the mop and went back to work. 6 hours later, the sky outside had turned the color of rust. Diana was in the supply room, restocking gauze, when the intercom exploded to life. Mass casualty event, chemical exposure, industrial site, 15 incoming, all critical. The words hit like a shockwave. Alarms started blaring. Footsteps pounded through hallways. Voices shouted over each other. Panic threading through the controlled chaos. Maya burst out of the break room, tablet in hand, eyes wide. 15? We don't have the resources for 15. Dr. Stevens was already moving, pulling on a gown as he ran. We triage hard. Get everyone to the bays. Derek, clear trauma 1 through 4. Jenna, pull every crash cart we have. The doors slammed open. The first gurney came through fast, wheels rattling, paramedics shouting vitals. The patient was seizing, body rigid, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. His pupils were pinpoint, constricted to almost nothing. Derek reached for him, then froze. What the hell is this? Another gurney crashed through behind him. Then another. Patients convulsing, vomiting, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The smell hit next. Sharp, chemical, wrong. Maya backed up a step, her face going pale. We need hazmat. Diana was already moving. She grabbed the first patient's wrist, felt for a pulse. Freddie, fast. She leaned in, smelled the air near his mouth. Bitter almonds mixed with something acrid. Then she checked his pupils. Pinpoint, salivation excessive, muscle fasciculations in his arms. She turned to Stevens, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Organophosphate poisoning. Probably pesticide. He needs atropine. Now. Stevens stared at her. How do you? Now. Something in her tone made him move. He didn't question it, just nodded and shouted to Derek. Get me atropine. 2 milligrams IV push, and keep it coming. Diana moved to the next patient. Same presentation. Pinpoint pupils, excessive secretions, respiratory distress. She didn't hesitate. This one too. Atropine and pralidoxime if we have it. Start high-flow oxygen. Maya stood frozen, staring at Diana like she'd never seen her before. Diana turned to her. Maya, I need you to triage. Red tags for anyone seizing or in respiratory distress. Yellow for stable vitals. Green for walking wounded. Move. Maya moved. Diana went patient to patient, her hands quick and precise, her voice calm and absolute. She wasn't asking anymore. She was commanding. Jenna, get IV access on that one. Wide bore. Derek, intubate the guy in trauma 3. His airways compromised. She moved like water through stone. No hesitation, no second guessing. Stevens watched her, something like awe crossing his face. Another patient crashed. Monitor screaming. Flatline. Diana was there in seconds. She started compressions, her hands locking over the sternum, pushing hard and fast. Someone bag him. Maya, push another round of atropine. Maya did, hands shaking but steady enough. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 more. The monitor beeped, once, twice, a rhythm. Diana stepped back, breathing hard but controlled. Stevens was staring at her again. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Diana didn't answer. She moved to the next patient. Outside, the sound of engines. Heavy. Multiple vehicles. Then the doors opened again. But this time, it wasn't an ambulance. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the emergency entrance. Men in dark suits stepped out. Moving with military precision, they wore badges. Military police insignia visible on their belts. And then, from the lead vehicle, a man in dress uniform. Colonel, late 50s, silver hair, trimmed tight, weathered face that had seen more than most, ribbons across his chest, combat infantry badge, airborne wings. He walked through the doors like he owned the place. Dr. Stevens intercepted him, still in his gown, splattered with blood and chemicals. Sir, this is a restricted. The colonel held up a hand, calm, authoritative. I'm looking for Diana Reese. Stevens blinked. Who's asking? The colonel's eyes were steady, hard. Her former commanding officer. The hallway went silent again. Even the alarms seemed quieter. Stevens stared at the colonel, then back toward the trauma bay, where Diana was still working, hands moving over a patient, checking lines, adjusting oxygen. She's in there. The colonel walked past him without another word. He stopped in the doorway of the trauma bay, watched Diana work for a long moment. She was intubating a patient, hands steady, movements perfect. She didn't notice him at first. Then she looked up and froze. The tube was still in her hands, the patient stabilized, but her entire body went rigid. The colonel didn't smile, didn't move. He just said, very quietly, "Hello, Diana." Her face went pale, the color drained in seconds. Around her, the other nurses and staff stalked, stared, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Diana set the tube down carefully, pulled off her gloves, straightened. Her voice came out quiet. "Sir." The word carried years of history, respect, fear, grief. The colonel stepped into the room. He looked around at the chaos, the patients, the organized precision of the response. Then he looked back at Diana. "You haven't lost a step." She didn't respond. He gestured toward the trauma bays, the patients being stabilized, the lines running, the monitors beeping steady rhythms. 15 patients, organophosphate poisoning. You identified it in under 30 seconds and coordinated a response that saved every single one of them. Stevens, standing behind him, stared. "Everyone?" The colonel nodded. "Everyone." He turned back to Diana. "We've been looking for you for 3 years. Diana's jaw tightened. "I didn't want to be found." "I know." Silence stretched between them. Then the colonel said, very quietly, "We need to talk." Diana looked at the patients, at the monitors, at the controlled. The chaos she'd pulled from the edge of disaster. Then she looked back at the colonel. "Not here." He nodded. "Outside." She followed him out, past the staring nurses, past Dr. Stevens, past the MPs waiting by the doors. And the emergency department, for the first time in hours, went completely silent. The hospital conference room was small and windowless. A single fluorescent light hummed overhead. A table, 6 chairs. A whiteboard on the wall with old marker stains that wouldn't erase. The air smelled like stale coffee and cleaning solution. Diana sat on one side. The colonel sat across from her. His uniform was immaculate, creases sharp enough to cut, ribbons telling stories she knew by heart. Bronze star, Purple Heart, combat medical badge. He folded his hands on the table and looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. "You disappeared." Diana's voice was flat. "I retired. You vanished. No forwarding address, no contact information. We tried to reach you for 3 years. I didn't want to be reached." He studied her face, the lines around her eyes, the gray in her hair, the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. "You were the best combat medic I ever saw. 4 deployments, more lives saved than most trauma surgeons will see in a career." Diana looked down at her hands, scarred, worn, the hands that had done things she couldn't undo. "I also lost 19. Her voice cracked, just once, but it was enough to break the surface. The colonel didn't look away. "That wasn't on you. They died while I was working on them, while I was trying, She stopped, closed her eyes. 19 soldiers who trusted me to bring them home. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Diana reached into her pocket and pulled out the pin, set it on the table between them. The metal caught the light, tarnished and dull. 68W, combat medic, and beneath it, scratched by hand, the initials, E.N. The colonel looked at it, recognized it. Martinez. Diana nodded, her throat tight. He was 26, shrapnel through the chest. We were 3 minutes from the LZ. I couldn't stop the bleeding. I tried everything. Pressure, hemostatic gauze. I even tried a thoracotomy in the field. She looked up, and her eyes were wet now, but she didn't let the tears fall. She looked at me and said, "It's okay, Sarge, you did good." And then she was gone. The colonel's face softened, just slightly. "You carried 19 losses, but you brought home 143. Diana shook her head. "The ones you save don't erase the ones you lose." "No, they don't." He leaned forward. "But you can't carry them forever, Diana, not like this. Not by burying yourself in a job where no one knows who you are." "I came here because I wanted to save people without counting bodies, without hearing mortars, without wearing the faces of dead kids home every night." Her voice broke again, harder this time. "I just wanted to stop remembering." The colonel was quiet for a long moment. And did it work? She didn't answer, because they both knew it hadn't. There was a knock on the door. Dr. Stevens stepped in, hesitant, his face apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk." The colonel gestured for him to enter. Stevens closed the door behind him and stood awkwardly near the table. "The hospital administrator wants Diana suspended, pending an investigation into her credentials." The colonel's expression didn't change, but his voice went cold. "Her credentials are impeccable." Stevens nodded quickly. "I'm sure they are. But she's been working as a janitor. And now we find out she has advanced trauma training. It raises questions. She has advanced trauma training because she spent 16 years saving lives in combat zones most people can't even pronounce." Stevens looked at Diana, his face conflicted. "Then why were you mopping floors?" Diana didn't meet his eyes. "Because I didn't want to be responsible anymore." Stevens sat down slowly, processing. "You just saved 15 people. Identified a mass poisoning in under a minute. Coordinated a response that should have taken a team of specialists." He paused. "And you did it because you couldn't help yourself." Diana finally looked at him. "I did it because they were dying." "Exactly." Stevens leaned forward, his voice gentler now. "You can't turn it off, Diana. You can't stop being who you are just because you're tired of the cost." "I tried, I know. But you just proved something." "What?" "That you're not done." Diana shook her head, but there was no conviction in it. The colonel spoke again, his tone softer now. "We're not here to pull you back in, Diana. I'm not asking you to re-enlist. I'm not asking you to go back." "Then why are you here?" "Because when that paramedic recognized you, it triggered a flag in the system. Someone with your training, your record, working under an assumed status. We had to follow up." Diana frowned. "Assumed status?" "You listed your previous experience as healthcare assistant on your application here. You buried your service record." "I had to." "Why?" She looked at the pin on the table. "Because if they knew, they'd expect me to be her. The sergeant. The one who doesn't hesitate, who doesn't break." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And I'm not her anymore." The colonel reached across the table and picked up the pin. He held it for a moment, then set it back down in front of her. "Yes, you are." Diana stared at it. "You just don't want to be." Silence filled the room. Stevens spoke quietly. "What do you want, Diana?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at the pin, at the colonel, at Stevens. Then she spoke, her voice raw but steady. "I want to stop seeing their faces every time I close my eyes. I want to stop hearing Martinez tell me it's okay, when it wasn't. I want to feel like saving someone doesn't come with a price I can't afford to pay." Stevens nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time to stop running from it, and start using it differently." Diana looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You've been hiding, because you thought the only way to escape the past was to erase it. But you can't. It's part of you." He paused. "So maybe instead of hiding it, you teach it. You pass it on. You make sure the next generation doesn't have to learn it the way you did." The colonel nodded. "He's right." Diana looked between them, something fragile and uncertain rising in her chest. "You think I can do that?" Stevens. N smiled, tired but genuine. "You just did. You took 15 dying patients and turned chaos into order. You didn't just save them. You led us." He stood. "That's not something you learn in a classroom, Diana. That's who you are." The colonel stood as well. "The choice is yours, but I'll tell you this. The world needs people like you. Not hiding, not running, teaching, leading, saving lives the way only you know how." Diana sat in silence, staring at the pin. Finally, she picked it up, held it in her palm, felt the weight of it. Then she looked up. "Okay." 48 hours changed everything. The emergency department looked the same. Same fluorescent lights, same vinyl floors, same distant hum of monitors and voices. But the air felt different. Diana walked through the automatic doors at 6 in the morning, the sun just starting to bleed orange through the clouds. She wasn't wearing the faded blue scrubs anymore. Tactical pants, navy blue, and fitted. A department polo shirt with her name embroidered on the chest. Her hair still pulled back, but looser now. Less severe. She looked like she belonged. The whispers had stopped, but the stares hadn't. Maya was at the nurse's station, logging overnight notes. She looked up when Diana approached, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maya set down her tablet. "I owe you an apology." Diana shook her head. "You don't." "I do." Maya's voice was tight, controlled. But shame bled through. "I judged you. I was cruel. I made assumptions about who you were based on your age, your position, and I was wrong." Diana met her eyes, steady, calm. "You didn't know. I should have tried." Maya paused, then added quietly, "I should have seen you." Diana didn't respond right away. She just nodded once, accepting it without making it easier. Maya straightened, her voice firmer now. "Dr. Stevens told us about the new position, Trauma Education Coordinator." "He did." "That means you'll be training us, if you want to be trained." Maya held her gaze. "I do." Jenna appeared from around the corner, holding a stack of charts. When she saw Diana, her face lit up with something close to relief. "You're back." Diana gave a small smile. "I am." Jenna hesitated, then stepped closer. "Will you teach us how to see what you see?" Diana looked at her, young, eager, unscarred by the things Diana had seen, and maybe that was the point. "I'll teach you what I can." Derek walked up, slower, more uncertain. His usual swagger was gone. He stopped a few feet away, hands shoved in his pockets. "I was an ass." Diana raised an eyebrow. "You were." He flinched, but didn't look away. "I didn't think you had anything to teach me. I thought you were just, I don't know, taking up space." Diana's expression didn't soften, but her voice did, just slightly. "And now?" Derek exhaled. "Now I know I don't know a damn thing." Diana studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's a start." Dr. Stevens emerged from his office, carrying a tablet and a folder thick with paperwork. He handed the folder to Diana. "Your new curriculum guidelines. The board approved your position this morning." Diana took the folder, flipped it open. Lesson plans, protocols, simulation schedules. It was real, tangible. "There's one condition." "Condition," Stevens added. Diana looked up. "No one gets left behind. Not patients, not staff. We move as a unit." She stared at him. Those words, her words, coming back to her now, solidified into policy. "That's not a condition," she said quietly. "That's a promise." Stevens smiled, the tired kind that carried hope underneath. "Good." He gestured toward the trauma bay. "Your first session starts at 0900. Maya, Derek, Jenna, and 4 residents. Think you can handle it?" Diana closed the folder. "I'll manage." The morning passed in a strange, surreal calm. Diana set up the simulation lab, pulling mannequins into position, prepping IV kits and airway supplies. She moved with purpose now, no longer invisible, no longer trying to be. At 9, the group gathered. Maya, Derek, Jenna, 4 residents in fresh scrubs, notebooks in hand, eager and terrified in equal measure. Diana stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, taking them all in. "You're here because someone decided you're worth training. That means I think you can handle what I'm about to teach you. If I'm wrong, you'll figure it out fast." She gestured to the mannequins. "This isn't theory. This isn't protocol memorization. This is decision-making under pressure. This is the 2 seconds between life and death, and learning how to choose correctly every time." One of the residents raised a hand. "What if we make the wrong choice?" Diana's expression didn't change. "Then the patient dies, and you learn from it, and you never make that mistake again." The room went quiet. "But here," she continued, "the patient is plastic. You get to fail safely. Out there," she pointed toward the emergency department, "you don't. So we're going to fail here until you stop failing." She moved to the first mannequin. Scenario 1. 32-year-old male. Motor vehicle collision. Unresponsive. "What's your first move?" Jenna stepped forward. "Airway." "Good. Show me." Jenna positioned herself, tilted the head, checked for obstructions. Her hands moved carefully, methodically. Diana watched, silent, letting her work. Then she said, "He just vomited. What now?" Jenna froze. He's aspirating. You have 3 seconds." Jenna's hands fumbled. Panic crept into her movements. Diana stepped in, turned the mannequin on its side, cleared the airway with a sweep of her hand. "You hesitated. Hesitation kills." Again, they ran the scenario 5 more times. By the end, Jenna's movements were faster, cleaner, confident. Diana moved to Derek. Tension pneumothorax. You've got a needle decompression kit. Where do you go? Derek pointed. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Show me. He did. Fast. Accurate. Diana nodded. Not bad, but you didn't listen to lung sounds first. You got lucky. Next time, confirm before you cut. Derek nodded, absorbing it. They worked through scenarios for 2 hours. Trauma after trauma. Chemical exposure, cardiac arrest, pediatric seizures. Each one designed to push them, to break their assumptions, to make them think faster than fear. By the end, they were exhausted, sweating. But their eyes were sharper. Diana stood in front of them again. You did well. Not great, but well. We'll do this twice a week, every week, until you stop thinking. Ninking and start knowing, she paused. Questions? Maya raised her hand. How did you do this? For 16 years, how did you not break? Diana looked at her for a long moment. I did break, more than once, but I got back up, because the person in front of me needed me to. She let that sit. That's the only reason that matters. Not protocol, not ego, not fear. Just them, the patient. The person who's counting on you to be better than your worst day. The room was silent, dismissed. They filed out slowly, quietly, carrying something heavier than they'd walked in with. Diana stayed behind, cleaning up the simulation equipment. She moved methodically, her hands steady again. Dr. Stevens appeared in the doorway. That was impressive. Diana glanced at him. They're good. They just needed to be pushed. They needed you. She didn't argue. Stevens stepped inside, leaning against the counter. The board wants to expand the program. Bring in paramedics, fire department. Make this a regional training hub. Diana paused, holding an IV kit in her hands. That's a lot of responsibility. You've carried more. She looked at him. I'm not that person anymore. You're exactly that person. You just have a chance to be her differently now. Diana set the kit down. And if I fail? Stevens smiled. Then you'll learn from it, and you'll never make that mistake again. Her own words, thrown back at her, she almost laughed. You've been listening. I'm a good student. Diana shook her head, but there was warmth in it now, something like peace. She looked around the simulation lab, at the mannequins, the equipment, the space where people would come to learn, to fail safely, to become better. It wasn't a desert. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't a war zone. But it was hers. And maybe that was enough. 6 months later, the training center had a name. Reese Center for Trauma Excellence. Diana had fought the name. Said it was too much, too personal. But Dr. Stevens insisted, and the board agreed, and eventually she stopped arguing. The center occupied the entire second floor of the East Wing now. 4 simulation bays, a lecture hall, equipment that rivaled most teaching hospitals, and a wall near the entrance covered in photographs. Not of Diana, of the people she'd trained. Nurses, paramedics, residents, firefighters. Each one, standing beside a patient they'd saved using what she'd taught them. 127 photos. 127 lives. Diana stood in front of that wall now, early morning light filtering through the windows. She was 59. The gray in her hair had spread, but she didn't hide it anymore. The lines around her eyes were deeper, etched by late nights and early mornings, and the weight of responsibility she'd finally stopped running from. She wore the same tactical pants, the same department polo, but pinned to her chest now, just above her name, was the small tarnished metal pin. 68W. She didn't hide it anymore either. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned. Jenna walked in, no longer uncertain, no longer hesitant. She moved with confidence now, shoulders back, a trauma kit slung over one shoulder. Morning. Diana nodded. Morning. Jenna stopped beside her, looking at the wall. We added 3 more yesterday. I saw. MVA on the interstate. Driver ejected. Tension pneumo, just like you taught us. Maya did the needle decompression in under 30 seconds. Diana's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. She's come a long way. We all have. Jenna glanced at Diana. Because of you. Diana didn't respond, just looked at the photos. All those faces, all those lives that continued, because someone had been trained to act instead of freeze. I just showed you what I knew. You showed us how to see, how to think, how to be calm when everything's falling apart. Jenna paused. That's not something you can teach from a book. Diana turned to face her. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. but not in time to save them. The words hung in the air, heavy and true. The door opened again. Derek walked in, followed by 2 new residents. He nodded to Diana, respectful in a way he never used to be. Simulation starts in 10. We ready? Diana checked her watch. We're ready. They moved into the main bay, mannequins positioned, monitors set, scenarios cued. Diana stood at the center, arms crossed, watching her team prepare. They weren't just nurses anymore. They were a unit, coordinated, precise, trusting each other the way soldiers trusted each other. The way she'd once trusted Martinez. The thought came without the usual stab of pain. Just a quiet ache. Manageable, almost gentle. She pulled the pin from her chest, held it in her palm for a moment. Ran her thumb over the initials scratched into the metal. EM. Then she pinned it back on. The session ran for 3 hours. Scenario after scenario. Multi-vehicle collision. Building collapse. Active shooter with mass casualties. Each one designed to overwhelm, to push them past their limits, to force them to make impossible choices. And they did, calmly, efficiently, without hesitation. By the end, Diana stood back and watched them work without her guidance. They didn't need her anymore, not in the moment. They needed her to have taught them. But now, they moved on their own. That was the point. After the session ended, after the residents filed out and the equipment was cleaned and stored, Diana found herself alone in the lecture hall. She opened her locker. Inside, the photograph was still pinned to the back. But it wasn't hidden anymore. Next to it, new photos. Jenna at her graduation. Maya receiving a commendation. Derek shaking hands with the fire chief after a joint training exercise. And beneath them all, the folded flag. Still there, still honored, but no longer the only thing she carried. She closed the locker and walked to the windows, overlooking the emergency department below. Gurneys moving, nurses running, doctors calling orders. Controlled chaos. Life and death playing out in real time. She'd been part of that chaos for 16 years in deserts and mountains and places most people would never see. She'd saved lives and lost them, and carried the weight of both until it nearly crushed her. But she was still here, still standing, still saving people, just differently now. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. You planning to stand there all day? Dr. Stevens walked up beside her, coffee in hand, looking as tired as always. Yes, but smiling anyway. Just thinking. About? Diana watched the department below. About how strange it is. I spent years trying to disappear, trying to be invisible, and now... She gestured toward the training center, the wall of photos, the people moving through the halls who looked at her with respect instead of pity. Now, I can't hide even if I wanted to. Stevens took a sip of his coffee. Good. Diana glanced at him. You think so? I know so. You were wasted mopping floors. Diana, you're not wasted here. She looked back at the department. I still see their faces sometimes, the ones I couldn't save. I know. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. Stevens nodded slowly. That's called healing. Diana let out a long breath. Quiet, steady. Maybe it is. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the organized chaos below. Then Stevens spoke again, his voice softer. You know what the paramedic said? The one who recognized you? Diana frowned. When? Last week. He came back, brought his whole unit through for training. I didn't see him. You were in a lecture, but he told me something. Stevens turned to face her. He said that in Fallujah, when you pulled him out of that crater, you didn't just save his life. You taught him how to stay calm under fire, how to think instead of panic. And when he got home, he became a paramedic because of you. Diana's throat tightened. He said that? He did. And he's not the only one. 3 of the people you saved overseas are in emergency medicine now, because of you. Diana closed her eyes. Stevens continued, you've been carrying 19 losses for 16 years, but you've created a legacy that saved hundreds, maybe thousands, and you're still building it. Diana opened her eyes, looked at the training center, at the people moving through it, at the lives being shaped and sharpened and prepared. I tried to run from who I was. And instead, you ran toward who you're supposed to be. She looked at him. You really believe that? Stevens smiled. I've seen the evidence. Diana turned back to the window. Below, an ambulance pulled up. Paramedics rushed a patient inside. The team mobilized instantly. Smooth, coordinated, ready. Some of them had trained here. Some of them had learned from her, and because of that, The patient had a chance. Diana pulled the pin from her chest one more time, held it up to the light. 68W. Combat medic. She wasn't in the desert anymore, wasn't in a war zone, wasn't wearing fatigues or carrying a rifle or hearing the thunder of rotors overhead. But she was still a medic, still saving lives, still making sure no one got left behind. She pinned it back on her chest and turned away from the window. There was another session in an hour, another group of people who needed to learn how to choose life over death in the span of 2 seconds. And she would teach them. Not because she had to, because she finally understood that this was who she'd always been, not running from the past, building a future from it. Diana Reese walked out of the lecture hall, through the training center that bore her name, and into the noise and chaos and beautiful, impossible work of saving lives. She didn't look back. She didn't need to anymore.